Hi, this is Jim Norris. I'm very fortunate today to have Gil Moore, an old friend, and we've had a very long relationship. I hate to even think of how long it is. It's like 50 years or something crazy like that. So,
Yeah,
and
it's
in
a
a
long time.
variety of functions, I guess you could call it. So, I'm going to go way, way back to when you first started playing the drums, how that came about, why it happened, and how old were you?
Oh golly. Well, I went in the Cedar Crescent Casino in Port Elgin with my friend Brad and saw the Comets. I would think it would have been about 1963 or 4 or something like that.
Yeah.
And as soon as I saw those red sparkle drums and I heard the crash boom bang, I was hooked. And it was kind of that magnet. Then the problem was, of course, well, we don't have drums and they cost a lot of money that I don't have. So it was, snow shoveling and mowing grass in the summer and a paper route. And, I got my first set of terrible drums, Japanese drums that were horrible called bell tone. I still remember them. And yeah, I started listening to the Rolling Stones and Beatles,
And
try to figure out what's going on. There's no such thing as lessons or YouTube. It was figured out for yourself.
how old were you then?
I guess probably got those drums when I was 13, I'm going to say 12 or 13.
Okay.
And and then a few years later, my dad had to come to Long and McQuaid with me and co-sign for me to get a time payment plan to get a good set of drums and, pay them off 1 month at a time. And that was when I got my first set of a pro kit. It was a Rogers kit. It was really a good.
Roger's great. Yeah.
Yeah, with a Ludwig Supraphonic 400 snare drum. It was a really nice kit. That was
Yeah.
pre-CBS Rogers, so Rogers were really good drums at that stage. They
Yeah.
less so later on, but
I think every musician in Toronto owed money to Long McQuaid. That was just the way it was.
it's a pilgrimage.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
We
So,
have a Long and McQuaid, well, a Jack Long, I should say, scholarship now at my school
oh,
that
great.
we're just launching actually this year
Excellent. Oh,
in
that's
his
great.
honor.
They're up to 108 stores now.
I know they're just a freight train.
Yeah, it's incredible. So
Yeah.
what was the first actual band that you played in?
Oh, golly, well, it really didn't have a name. I mean, that was part of every Saturday at the Saturday rehearsal, there would always be time parked to sit around and talk about what the name of our band should be. And we never, it just could never kind of get a name. And well, okay, well, next week we'll figure out a name. And of course, we never had a show that we could play. We really never got out of the basement. So we really never had a name. And yeah, and then I guess the first time I was in a band with a name, it was one of the greatest names of all time, Mondo plus 4. What could be better than that? Yeah. I joined their band and they were considerably older than I was, but I'd improved my playing skills enough that I was able to pass the audition in that band after having failed auditions in several others. I failed an audition with the Night Train. Jim Snowden and the Night Train. I failed an audition with Edward Bear. Um, and then I made the cut, I guess you'd say, into Mondo plus 4.
Wow. So then when did Abernathy Shagmaster, talk about names, when did when did that come along?
Well, don't blame me for that name.
No.
That was Larry Cuthbertson's idea, and you know him.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, that that came, yeah, that came after Mondo plus 4. And Abernathy Shagmaster it was like a tossed salad because members kept coming and going. And, we started out, we were super hard rock, all original material, kind of, like we had 2 lead guitar players, kind of like Zeppelin-ish, kind of, thing. And we would just get kind of fired everywhere. And, your good friend Terry Fillion was our agent.
Oh my God. There's a name
And
for the
he
fat.
would he would call me and he would say, "Gil, can you please learn some cover songs? No one wants to hear your overly loud stuff that no one knows those songs." And, by the way, can you get some 8x10s that are clear? Your photos are fuzzy. So I was constantly being told, that we weren't ready for prime time. And we kept doing what we were doing and trying to write original songs, and we didn't really know what we were doing. And like Terry said, we had lousy photos, and that meandered along until I got into I got a call at the time, to the big leagues. I got a call from Buzz Sherman to come and join what it eventually became Moxie, but to join Sherman and Peabody.
Right.
Just when I hooked up with Greg Godovitz and Buzz and the guys in that band. And then it almost became a mishmash between the two bands. I get like we were talking kind of, the guys from John Lee and the Checkmates and Rhinoceros and Blackstone Rangers and guys, they were around what we were doing, and kind of I felt mentored by all those guys because they were older and better players and wiser. So a lot of great influences. We mentioned late great Freddie Keeler, one of the best guitar players ever in the city of Toronto. So long before being fortunate enough to play with Rick Emmett and Phil X, who were fantastic guitar players, I was around Freddie Keeler. It was, again, phenomenal influence for a drummer to be able to play with a guitarist that was that talented.
For sure. And he influenced a whole litany of guitarists. A lot of the younger kids, I guess, nowadays don't really, they might have heard of Kim Mitchell, but maybe they've heard of Robbie Robertson, maybe they've heard of Dominic Turano, but a lot of them wouldn't know Freddie Keeler. But those Dominic used to sit there and watch Freddie Keeler. He'd sit out front the stage, and that's who he learned from. And I didn't, as I said to you, I discovered on Wikipedia that he was in Abernathy Shagmaster. I didn't know that. I knew him mostly from David Clayton Thomas days. Some of those records. It's incredible.
When Freddie came into the band, he came in actually not as a musician. He agreed to be our coach.
Oh,
Because we really didn't know what we were doing. We were trying to learn, and he was older and he had a lot of musical sensibility, and skills, and he kind of functioned like a coach. And then it was kind of like at a certain point he liked us, and he kind of agreed to join the band. And yeah, it was funny how that evolved. But I went through that with a lot of the older musicians. It was like John Finley sang, sporadically, in that band. Mike Fonfera, one of the greatest organists, ever, Canadian organists, was in and out of the band and stuff. And we remained good friends for years and years and years. So I was fortunate that, some of the earlier musicians, kind of took me under their wing a little bit and helped me out. And of course, as far as drummers, I'll never forget Skip Prokop, because he really helped me more than anybody else as far as the drums were concerned.
yeah. I remember when I was at University of Toronto, and I used to go see the Poppers. I still remember the first night I saw them, and it was like, my God, what is this? This is like crazy stuff here. And him and Denny Gerard and Chuck Beal and Adam Mitchell. I mean, I still remember their names after all this time, but I remember going to see them at one of the clubs in Yorkville, and that was such an experience. And that's a long time ago. But yeah, Skip was just because of his drum corps training. He used to do these crazy double stroke rolls. I remember him doing triplets, but they were double stroke rolls, and I thought, my God, that's the craziest thing I've ever seen. But they were an amazing band, and then of course, a lot of people know him from Lighthouse days.
Yeah, I relate to Skip Moore in the Poppers era as you do, because he became more of a songwriter and a singer. And I think, he kind of put the drums, not to the side, but the drums weren't as important. Is that when he came right out of De La Salle Drum Corps, and that's what just blew my mind. And I met him by following him, like, being a groupie more or less, and I had a little notebook, and I used to try to understand what he was doing. As you said, I couldn't understand what he was playing, so
No, no.
I made all these notes. And one day at Port Credit High School, he saw me beside the bandstand, and he says, "What's this kid doing?" And he came off stage and he kind of grabbed my shoulder and he startled me and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, I kind of, it was like Jackie Gleason, humana, 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 humana. And I said, I'm trying to figure out, what you're playing. And he goes, "Okay, well, let me show you what I'm playing." And he literally, during their break, took me into the Poppers dressing room with the other guys and got a pair of sticks and handed them to me. And he had a pair of sticks. And he started showing me stuff, just playing on our knees. And it was amazing how much information he could impart in 15 minutes. And I walked out of there like I felt like I was walking on air when I left. I went home and told my mom and dad, "Oh, I met this guy, and he's a genius. He's the best drummer you've ever seen." The only guy I ever saw that had a shock effect on me was Buddy Rich,
Right.
who I think is the greatest of all time.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
in Toronto, in rock, I mean, Skip was the greatest. And I got to thank him so much later, like decades and decades and decades later, because we were never friends or anything like that. He had no idea. And I said to him when I was, an adult, I said, "Skip, you'll never remember this because I was just a kid and you were really kind to me. And this is what you showed me. And this is, how you did it." And I could still remember he said, "You have a practice pad?" And I went, "Yeah, but it's not a real one." And he said, "What do you mean it's not a real one?" I said, "Well, I didn't have the money for a real one, so I made one out of a piece of plywood, and I took the mud flap off my bike, and I cut the mud flap into a square, and then I nailed it to the board." And he's listening to all this. He says, "No, no, 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 that's not how you do it. And don't ever get a real practice pad. They're garbage." He said, "You use a pillow. That's all you'll ever use for now and the rest of your life. You just use a pillow." It's the best piece of advice you could have given a kid, you know? And then he asked me what size of sticks I was using, and I told him. He said, "No, no, 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 no. You don't practice that way. You practice on a pillow. You use you use two Bs, nothing smaller than two Bs to practice." And how high do your sticks go? And then I showed him. He says, "No, no, 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 no. They got to go at least 18 inches." Everything was precision this, precision that. Like it was, like you say, it's military drumming.
Yeah.
So it was, yeah, I'll never forget the guy.
That's incredible. So,
He made me woodshed. He made me do 10,000 hours because he got me so excited.
yeah, that's good. So, talk about the beginnings of Triumph, how that came about.
So we were, kind of as a musician, I was kind of floundering at that point because I'd been through all these other bands and, how ridiculously hard it was to get a record deal in those days. And basically just to get out of, the local high schools or the local bar scene or whatever just seemed like impossible. And, no Canadian bands were making it. Even bands as, like you said, as great as the Poppers or who, the door would just kind of get shut on them as soon as they tried to do anything in America. And I mean, there was, some tiny little exceptions, I mean, the Guess Who had a hit, but, um, this it still was nobody broke the doors down into America, which is kind of what everybody wanted to do. I'm talking about bands now, so I'm not talking about, Joni Mitchell here, or,
Right.
um, or Neil, but, uh, I guess Mike was at the same stage. He was kind of like, well, he's moved into being a record producer. He was involved with Motherlode. They had a hit. I started to move. I've always loved sound, and I still do. That's why I'm sitting in a studio. I, there was no Metalworks, but I had this little fledgling kind of, I don't know, sound company, I guess you'd call it, that, I started in my parents' basement, and I was really intrigued by all of that. And I thought, maybe I should just, forget about just play part time. And so a lot of what we did, so I started playing with Mike, was just kind of like for fun on the weekend. And we'd now capitulated. We weren't playing original music and we weren't going to be rock stars. We were just, playing the top 40 hits, which is what, booking agents wanted us to do, to get jobs. And then Mike and I forget, we were going to a gig or from a gig one night or whatever. And the discussion just erupted into, you know what? Wouldn't it be nice to just really try one last time to see if we could actually have a band that could actually, do something? And we both realized, well, we had a lot of ideas that were similar and about style of music and about the complexion of the group and so on. And we realized that it wasn't going to work with the other guys we were with at that time for different reasons. Freddie was the guitar player. And it wasn't that he wasn't a great guitar player. It was just that's not what he wanted to do, and
Right.
the type of music he wanted to pursue, and so on and so forth. So, we decided, kind of just dreamt up what Triumph was going to be, and started looking for a guitar player. And we were pretty frustrated because we really couldn't find the guitar player. And we had at one point we started to rehearse with another guitar before Rick started to rehearse with one of the guitar players. So it got pretty serious, and then it kind of fell apart. Uh, and then we got a tip about Rick. So where he was playing, and we went to see Rick, and Mike we looked at each other and just went, yeah, he's the guy. Like he's our guy. We just got to convince him to join the band. So we did. We convinced him to join our band. And we had a lot of big ideas. They seem very Spinal Tap-ish now, looking back on them, very silly. But they, that's what it is when you're a young musician. You have a lot of naive ideas, and hopefully some of them work.
That's for
And in our case, this was like all of a sudden we'd somehow captured some lightning in a bottle, and it was like no band that I'd ever been in before. There was no struggle. It was just as soon as we played for people, it was just a springboard to whatever the next thing that was going to happen.
That's great. What I was talking to Andy Kim yesterday, and the thing that he really stressed was that you have to have a dream. You have to be able to dream and visualize and not wish, but dream. And he said since he was, can't remember when he started, but he was in his teens, and he had a dream of what he wanted to do. And then, of course, he went beyond that. He took the action to make it happen. But he really stressed the dream part of it, and it sounds like, you guys could see Triumph before it existed, really, and what it was going to.
We had a dream. Yeah, you're right. I guess we could. We knew it was going to be a power trio. We knew, more or less the guardrails on what kind of music we would play. And but it was immediate with Rick. I mean, it was like the first rehearsal, it was just we went, wow, this is it. And same thing with the first gig we played, which, I now have said it in enough interviews, people know, it was in Simcoe District High School. And in September of 75, that was when we first, set foot on stage after we got out of our rehearsals in the bowling alley in Mississauga. And it was, but the reaction was instantaneous. I had enough bands that failed to know when an audience actually likes the band.
Right.
It's not hard to figure out when you're on stage.
So then, how did you develop that into the big production act that Triumph became? Because
Putting all the money back into it.
yeah,
Yeah. We it was kind of go big or go home from day one. And we just kept trying to get access to, better equipment, better lighting designers, better sound companies, and so on. Like I had to fire myself because I originally, it was me. It was my sound and lighting, and which I quite loved, but I realized I could not keep up with Triumph,
right.
and didn't want to. So it was okay. So now we found a sound company in New Mexico, and we had another sound company in Texas, and we just one way or the other, went through these companies till we finally ended up at DB Sound in Chicago, where we stayed forever, and still they were bought by Claire, and we're still very good buds with our front of house Harry Witz, who just works. He still will do Triumph, and he does AC/DC and Scorpions. That's all he does. Those three
Wow,
bands.
that's great.
Yeah, so you pursue these guys, and like our lighting designer Paul Dexter, I'm still working with him right now. In hopes of putting together this I'll call it a futuresque experiential show that I'm trying to do with Triumph, a new version of Triumph. And it's been great to have those relationships over the year and see where technology's gone. And now, Jim, as you know, with your magazines and websites and stuff around professional sound and lighting, it's really fascinating. And AI's now like notched it up another a quantum leap forward in terms of what's possible. So
For
pretty
sure.
cool stuff. I'm still excited by it.
Yeah, well, a lot of people talk about the good old days, and um, there were good things about it, but there's a lot of things now that are better. I mean, having social media and having the ability to record reasonably, and the fact that you've got the internet, worldwide access. I think a lot of the artists nowadays kind of take all that for granted. But I mean, certainly in the old days when I was playing, I mean, we used to mail out a newsletter. I mean, that was that, or you put an ad in the Toronto Telegram. I mean, that was how you got the word out. But nowadays, there's just a lot available, and there's a lot of competition, of course, as well, more than there was in those days. So, um, after, of course, Triumph, I guess, because Triumph, sort of stopped and started, and it's still around, obviously, in a way, even though maybe you're not out touring every day. But after that, you started Metalwork Studios, which is, I don't know how many years that is now. It's when
Almost, we're closing in on 50 because it started in 1977.
wow, that's incredible. And some of the best artists in the world have recorded there. And
We've been very lucky, with the artists that have come through over the years, and that's kind of fueled the growth. And even up into the modern age with The Weeknd and Justin Bieber and Drake, have all spent time here, and I'm grateful to those artists. Still, we're still now with what we're doing, like, because we've migrated into sound and lighting, as you know, with our
right,
production company, and our school is doing great. And we've now got a charity called Sounds Unite Canada that we've built, sort of bootstrapped it from the ground up to try to get music education and music wellness out to kids for free across Canada. It's been a great ride at Metalworks, and all the permutations or all the ways it's changed and grown over the years has all just been fun for me, and more so now because two of my kids are in the business, full time, and one of my son-in-laws, and so we're like a family organization. And of course, the staff we have here are like family to me too. I'm very lucky the people we have here.
that's great. And from a time management point of view, how do you balance all of that? How do you keep all those balls in the air and still have time to have a family life? Because you've got, the three businesses and now a charity plus things that you're doing with Triumph. It's a lot of stuff to stick in a week.
I don't I don't I'm not hard on myself, like, I still spend enough time hitting golf balls that I get that out of me. That's my release.
Right.
And I spend time talking to all three of my kids. I talk to them all every day. It comes back to the great people that we have here at Metalworks. Like, yeah, I'm here and I'm involved in a lot of the processes, but there's a lot of processes that are just going on that are, they've been going for so long, and they're well managed, and I don't have to be involved in it. So I don't, I compare notes with my wife in the evenings, and she says, "How did it go today?" And I go, "Well, every day's, it's a lot of fun, actually."
Right.
I don't resent going to work. I enjoy it. I enjoy it. It doesn't feel like work to me. It feels like, this is music. I kind of feel like I've managed to avoid having a job my whole life.
No,
I don't know if that makes sense, but
no, it's
that's
true.
what it
It's true.
feels like. I get up when I want to get up. I kind of do mostly what I want to do. Like,
Yeah.
yesterday, I did some interviews like this one, and that I got to be punctual if I'm doing an interview. But most of the other stuff I do, I kind of try to float like a butterfly and sting like a bee.
Sure. Yeah, so I noticed that in through Triumph in your own history, there's a fair amount of focus on charity and working with other people. And maybe you can just go over the benefits of that, I guess, that, you know, a lot of musicians do that, obviously, but just kind of talk about the benefit to the person giving as well as the people that are receiving.
You know what? For me, Jim, it starts with teachers. And one of the reasons that I started the school, which is now over 20 years old, but one of the reasons I started is I really had a rough time in high school.
Right,
And it had nothing to do with anything other than, I would call it, the mentoring abilities of teachers. And I seemed to irritate. I was not a great student. I mean, behaviorally, I think I was okay when it came to understanding what was going on, but I was kind of lazy. And but I had the teachers I respected, and they were in one category, and then there was the other group of teachers who I thought were just these authoritarian jerks. And they really, I think it's that thing of being a young male, because you go into grade 9, you're 14 years old, and then so I was out of there by the time I was 16. Like I just couldn't stand some of these teachers. And so I thought it was so odd for somebody like me to start a school. And I just decided, as you know, because you're very familiar with it, I decided, like, this is a school of rock and the kids rule. So yeah, we set some guardrails and so on, and if anything, over the 20 plus years, I mean, they're getting tighter in a way to try to keep young people on the bike. If they fall off, put them back on. So we have, like, full-time TAs and mentors that are available to all our students 24/7. Well, not 24/7. I'm exaggerating, but you know what I mean. They're
yep,
always available, basically, to help them. And we don't have anybody that's nasty to young people, which it seemed like adults had a license to be nasty
right.
to young people. And I know you experienced it too.
Oh,
And
for sure.
yeah, so I feel like, to answer your question directly, I feel like if you're an adult in society, never mind being a musician or whatever it is you do, then this role of being a teacher or helping young people, it's incumbent upon us all to try to help young people. Because when you think back to those magic moments in your own life, like the one I mentioned earlier with Skip Prokop, like, I'll never ever forget, just that he took 15 minutes of his time to make some kid's day who he didn't know from Adam. Like, I was just some kid hanging out beside the stage. And so, uh, and I guess now too, after, my parents are gone now, but when I look at how they treated the neighborhood kids and how they raised me, and they were so kind and they were so forgiving of my failures and when I floundered, they helped me. Um, that's something I think we, as a society, as a community, the people that are reach a certain age of maturity, they need to take a role in trying to help the next generation, and they got to take it seriously. It's everyone's responsibility.
For sure. So if if somebody came to you for advice, which of course they do all the time, but if it was a new artist and they're just about to start a band or they're just in a band, but they have a dream, what advice would you give them? What should they focus on?
It, it's some of the advice is generic, so the generic advice would be, it's about how hard you're willing to work
Right,
and about how much you're willing to compete. Because I compare music to sports, and I say, look, yeah, everyone wants to be on the Toronto Maple Leafs or the Toronto Raptors, but not everyone's good enough to do that. Beauty of music, it's great to do it as an amateur because you can do it forever, and it's a lot of fun. And there's not a lot of restrictions. You can do whatever you want. If you want to do it as a professional and you've made that decision, then you also need to decide how much effort you're willing to do. Because the mistake I see some young people make is that they think that because they want to be an artist, that there should be an audience for them. They don't have to create it. It's just the fact that they exist. There's this entitlement that, well,
right.
I should have an audience because I've written this song and my mom thinks it's great. As opposed to, I'm playing at a gig and there's a lot of people that want to see us. There's a lineup at the door because we're shaking the walls here. So there's a little bit of that about hard work is generic advice, I'd call it. Specific advice, like, I just look at the, kind of the mistakes that I made or that other musicians that are friends of mine made. And I said, you know what? You can't try to emulate things. You can be influenced by things, but you really need to try to create something that's unique. And that's so hard to do because there's so many people that have already gone before you. And of course, it gets more so each day. And now we got AI copying people and emulating people. So this whole idea of emulating as a route to me is one that's extremely flawed, and so many times the gatekeepers, um when they're looking for talent, they're kind of like, well, Taylor Swift is really big, so if you were more like Taylor Swift, well, guess what, there's only one lane called the Taylor Swift lane, and she's got the full lane.
Right.
So my advice would be the opposite. It would be like, okay, like observe to, or whoever, Drake or Abel, or, any of these artists that have done phenomenally well. It's like, you have to have your own lane, and you'll get to see it, because the next artist that breaks through that is like Drake won't be like Drake. It'll be, oh yeah, same, hey, the same area of music, let's say, but it's like comparing, as the Who to the Stones, or the Beatles, these bands that we grew up on. They were all kind of in the same boat, and yet they weren't, because they were all different stylistically. They all had their own signature. There was only one Pete Townsend, there was only one John Lennon, etc. So I think that's hard. I think sometimes young people are influenced to try to emulate other musicians instead of trying to find their own identity or their own signature, as I call it. So I encourage that. And then as far as like the awareness of the business, I really tell them to, you've got to be a contrarian, because so much of what you're told and you read is garbage. So you have to seek out the facts. You talked about the good old days a minute ago. So to me, the good old days were the bad old days. And I don't mean that like I didn't enjoy them. Like, I enjoyed them, don't get me wrong. But the opportunities now, despite the competition, are way better. And the at the end of the rainbow, I mean, if you just look at, say, these big acts that I mentioned, like most of them, their performance fees like $2 million a night. So, it just did not exist when you go back into the, Led Zeppelin probably never made more than $10,000, or, Jimi Hendrix probably made never more than $10,000 in one night. So were those the good old days? If Jimi Hendrix was playing now, he'd be $2.5 million a night.
For sure.
So, never mind the streaming royalties. All the complaints you hear about streaming royalties, like, I understand the mathematics behind it, and kids don't. If they just look at what's, and by no means am I not saying there's some very smart people like Chris Castle. I'm sure you're familiar with it, that American lawyer who's always fighting for the artists and trying to get rates increased and so on and so forth, and kind of fighting the musicians or the IP battle against big tech, which is a battle that needs to be fought. However, we're in an environment where, if you are very successful, there really is an awful lot. There's a huge reward at the end of the rainbow, just like there is in professional sports. So I think we're in a very, very good period right now where there's tremendous opportunity. And yeah, I think the glass is very much half full, not half empty. I guess that's my perspective.
Excellent. So I think this is a great place to wind it up, and like to thank you for your time. And yeah, we'll have to get together for a lunch one of these days. And
That'd be great, Jim. It's really nice to talk to you.
yeah, and I'm looking forward to hear more about your charity as it goes ahead as well.
You bet. Well, yeah, we will have to get together face to face. It's been a long time since
It
I
has.
don't know how the time slips by. So, but COVID put that gap in there, and then
Yeah,
it's very easy just to, all of a sudden the new normal is whatever it is, and
for
so
sure.
yeah, we got to see each other.
All righty. Thanks a
My
lot.
best tomorrow too.
Yeah, take care. Yeah,
All right, Jim. Have a great afternoon. Thanks for
great.
having me on.
Thank you.
Bye now.